this isn't anything that just is limited to the United States. It's a worldwide phenomenon.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to That UFO podcast on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. This is the other show. I am here with you, of course. Dan is joining me, as always. How are we doing, Dan?
I'm great, thank you. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm all
right. Did I just mess up my first line? How are you?
You pretty much did, yeah. I am good.
I was doing an impression of Avril Haines saying extraterrestrial. That's what.
Yeah, that was some interesting stuff. Choking on our words. Listen, Dan, it's not just the two of us for this show. We're going to bring in a guest in just a moment, and many of you will no doubt know who he is when you see him. I shouldn't hype it up too much, should I? It's just Vinnie from Disclosure Team. Oh, have I ruined that?
Ruined it.
But listen, this show this week is going to be all about the lesser known or lesser studied aspects of the phenomenon. And we've reached out to you, the viewers, the listeners. We've reached out to Twitter and Reddit, and we've got a load of good suggestions to discuss and talk through. But before we do that, let's bring Vinnie from Disclosure Team into the stream. Vinnie, how are we?
I'm good, thank you, gentlemen. Good to see you.
Welcome.
It's intimidating having someone on with a green screen, isn't it? Like, that's someone who's invested. That's an investment.
This is a green screen. This is entirely fabricated.
Yeah, Dan's actually in a nice room. He just makes it look like a trashed hole. But yeah, good to have you with us, Vinnie, at very short notice as well. But I just thought this would work really well with an extra voice in here. And a few of the people I got in touch with weren't available, and you were, so that's good to have you. No, but thank you, and hello to everyone as well in the chat as well. Good to see you. Good to have you with us. Or if you're listening to this in the future and it's not Friday at 11 p.m. UK, then hi. Hope you enjoyed the show. Listen, Vinnie, good to have you along with us. Like I said, we're going to be discussing lesser known or lesser understood aspects of the phenomenon, and we're going to kick off with some of the Discord chat. Now, if you're on the Patreon or Apple Premium, you get access to the Discord chat. Very popular, very friendly, a lot of really great conversation in there. And we're going to start off with Nathan. Nathan's one of the co-hosts on the Calling All Beings podcast. Vinnie, I believe you have an appearance this week on Calling All Beings, which people will be able to check out now, won't they?
Yeah, I'm actually going to record it real soon. So yeah, I'm speaking to DJ. So I'm really looking forward to that. I like that channel. I think they're doing great work.
They are. And Nathan's been a listener to this podcast for quite a while, and he's been on quite a few of the call-ins as well. And he kicks off with agendas. He thinks the actual agenda of the phenomenon, the entities, the beings, whatever they may be, is one of the lesser known or lesser understood aspects of this whole thing. Vinnie, as the guest, we'll start with you. Have you ever thought about the agendas of what might be going on with the phenomenon?
Yeah, I suppose I've probably considered most aspects of the phenomena at some point over the years, but you end up going into so much wild speculation, deep into any kind of rabbit hole that you kind of find yourself in, and the possibilities that I find there are so many of what the agenda could be, you know. So yeah, and I don't like to speculate too much, because I find that, especially if I talk about my speculations, people will quickly turn it into my beliefs, and then that's just a recipe for disaster.
So let's not speculate then, Vinnie. Why do you think another species or beings would be interested in us?
Well, I suppose one of the obvious reasons was that they had some part in why we're here as a human race. You know, they maybe interfered with our genetics or something, you know, back in generations ago, and that's certainly a quite a popular one. You know, I see it crop up here and there all the time.
Very recently, that's become kind of back. What's old is new again, and that's not something that's just come to the limelight recently. But that's something again that was mentioned a couple of times by people, and it's a theory that's gone back decades. But is that something you subscribe to, or something just more recently having heard that you think it's on the table?
No, you're absolutely right. It's something I've heard quite a while ago, you know, many years ago, and yeah, I have seen it crop up a lot more recently, but I can't subscribe to anything that doesn't have any conclusive evidence, data, proof, you know, something that keeps it high up on my list. You know, it just has to remain in that realm of maybe.
Yeah.
You know?
Speaking of maybes, Dan.
Hi. My microphone was maybe muted. It was in a super position and it ended up in the right one.
It is both muted and unmuted at the same time. Dan, agendas. What about yourself? What are your thoughts on what any potential agenda could be from alien species?
It's a really interesting question, because we always have to think of these things in terms of, relative to us in anthropomorphic ways, we say. And it always gets kind of compared to, the conquistadors in Mexico, and kind of wiping out a whole civilization. And that's very human thinking, you know. Some of the ideas we've heard thrown around as to why they could be here, they're not necessarily here for us. We could just be part of the fauna that they consider part of this planet, like a whale or a dog, or how we consider an ant. But it could simply be a fuel stop. We've heard Lou talk about how it's easier to get hydrogen from water than it is to kind of scoop it up from nebula clouds and refine it from there. So it could be, anything from DNA manipulation, which goes back to our explosion about 70,000 years ago in complexity of language and agriculture and things like that. But then even that keeps going further and further back the more we kind of dig into things. Things are just getting older. So yeah, it could be anything from that to a fuel stop to just a curiosity and, looking at developing life around the universe, kind of like what we're doing on Mars, right? We have the rover kind of prodding around. If there was any life there, they would look at it curiously and probably think, oh, it's here for us. No, not really. I mean, we'd love it if we found that form of life with the rover, but it's geared towards a very specific mission.
Absolutely. I like it. Cool. Nathan, thank you very much. Dave Smethurst, long-time listener and contributor, he put activity on the moon and reluctance to go back. Now, obviously, Bill Nelson has just literally discussed that we are looking to go back to the moon as a bit of a way stop on our way to Mars, and just to prepare for that. However, it has been a long time, and you would have thought, I'm sure, back in the 60s and 70s, when these things were much more prevalent, that by now we'd have been going back and forward to the moon like in Futurama, when it's literally a couple of seconds trip. Vinny, I'll bring you in on that one first. So what are your thoughts on, and again, this goes into conspiracy theory territory probably a little bit, but I like a bit of this. So potential activity on the moon. Now, and I've got to mention, we actually had a listener get in touch and correct me during the week for apparently not being clear enough that I said the moon is definitely hollow. And it was a bit too conspiracy-ish, apparently. I said it could be. There obviously is the idea that it rang like a bell when the Apollo missions landed and they measured it. However, I was told that you would also ring an anvil. If you hit an anvil with a hammer, it would also ring. And an anvil is solid, so that's a fair point. But I did ask the question that surely you still can't confirm 100% that the moon is definitely completely solid inside. But thanks for getting in touch anyway. I don't propagate the theory 100% that the moon's hollow, but it's still an interesting conversation, Vinny. What do you think's going on?
It certainly is really interesting. I mean, over the years, we've seen so many documentaries talking about moon bases, the dark side of the moon even possibly being a spaceship in itself. That's been a big theory over the years that I've come across here and there. And yeah, they sound like fantastic scripts for really good sci-fi movies or something. But beyond that, for me, I can't take it any further. I do like the idea. I suppose some are more plausible than others. Maybe the moon was used as a way stop over generations again and thousands of years. And, if it stays in with the one side facing here, then it maybe makes sense that there's stuff on the dark side that we can't see, where things could be happening now. Things could have stopped happening many years ago. And yeah, obviously we see photographs from the moon, and we've seen them again for decades, where people say, look, there's a building, that's a structure. I struggle with it personally, but again, I like the idea because it could be, but it's not like it's look, there's a house in the windows and you can see doorways and stuff like that. It's just like, well, it does look kind of like got some symmetry to it or something, but again, it could be natural. So yeah, it is fun. I don't have these discussions often, so it's kind of cool.
When you think, though, we always think of a smoking gun for existence of other life being like a clear picture or video of a UFO. But if on some NASA mission or one of the Chinese lunar missions or Russian, they managed to capture a picture of what was a clear building or structure on the moon, that's it. you don't even need that UFO or video anymore, because that's proof of something has or does exist. And that would be an incredible conversation just to have. I mean, that could still go on for decades with nothing else, because what if you go in and there's nothing there anymore? And then obviously I think in 2021 we would still have people surmising that, well, it's probably ours. Yeah, we've been on the moon for a while and everything else. But Dan, I'll bring you in on the moon theories. What's your take?
What you guys were just talking about is kind of exactly what Avi Loeb is getting at with Oumuamua and all these extra solar objects that are coming in to visit us. We wouldn't necessarily recognize a building of another species if we saw it. And if the species was long gone, then we know that these buildings break down over time. You know, what is a building could be a stub. But Vinny's totally right. Like, there's a danger of doing a little bit of God in the gaps here and kind of going, oh, just because we can't see it, that's where the solution is. And that's not necessarily true. But it is true that, you can see the pictures of the what's called a monolith on the moon. And it's just, a tall spike out the landscape. Until we see more of that, we can't say that that's an extraterrestrial building. It's a peculiar feature that needs more studying. And it reminds me of the debate that we've had with UFOs and UAP as a whole. It's gone from really fanciful stuff to kind of saying, you know what, there's truth in this, but we need to kind of unmuddy the waters here so we can actually do some work and progress and figure this out. It might be that that's a building on the moon, but don't start with assuming it's a building on the moon. That's a bad way to go about it.
Vinny, why do you think we haven't gone back to the moon? Do you think there's something sinister there? We all hear the rumors that, when they landed on the moon, there were ships in the craters watching, and at various different points there may have been other craft within the areas. Do you think there's any truth to that, or do you think it's a case of it was too expensive, too difficult, and we just stopped trying?
Yeah, the latter. I think it was nothing sinister. I think it was they'd done what they needed to do. They'd had enough samples from the moon to look at. There wasn't any initial plans to use it as a way stop to go onto Mars, through the 70s and 80s, as far as I know. So I think it was just a case of, the focus was switching to the space shuttle program kind of after Apollo and things like that. And maybe funding got in the way. The years passed and it just never really happened again. I didn't ever read about any particular urge to go back to the moon. I think George W. Bush mentioned something when he first got into office in the early 2000s about a plan to go to the moon. But we hear these things come up, and then a year or two later we hear, oh, we're putting that on the back burner again. And there you go. That's kind of how I see it, to be honest.
I think Elon Musk and co have probably helped speed things up a little bit, because they're commercializing space tourism so quickly. You can't imagine it's too long before someone like Musk says, I fancy going to the moon, and I'm just going to build a craft that can do it, and I'll go myself.
Yeah. When you look at I read somewhere, I can't remember the exact time, but basically it took us ages and ages and ages. We're talking years to build the International Space Station. It was cutting edge science. The capacity of the ships wasn't very big. It took, part of it is Russian, part of it is from the US. It's a kind of a hodgepodge of things. And now if SpaceX was told, okay, we've got all the parts for the space station, but we need you to take it up, they could do it in a week. Like, it just shows how much of a revolution what SpaceX is doing is for the space industry. And it makes me think of with CERN, where they have the particle collider. CERN actually gets a budget, a percentage of the whole budget every single year, so it's consistent. So they can do things like, underspend 1 year and then put that money towards the particle collider, for example. So you see these huge projects like the particle colliders actually taking shape, and they'll keep kind of, they probably have 500 projects they want to do, but it's a case of saving up that budget that they know they are consistently getting. With NASA, it's different. That budget changes every year, and it's kind of at the whims of whoever's in the White House, really. And it's a shame, because I think SpaceX shows what NASA could have been if there was more consistent funding.
Dan, I'll stay with you for the next one. So this is from Rickson, and Rickson mentions that he feels the less studied aspect of the phenomenon is that there could be multiple beings or multiple entities all at work. And it's something we've discussed previously, Dan, the whole idea of phenomenon versus phenomenon. Where do you stand on do other entities know each other exist and how that might work?
I think the way we have to look at this question is that when we look outward, we don't really see other forms of life in the way that we expect to, like mainstream science thinks, I'll say. So if life is out there, it's in a form that we don't understand. And at every step that's in front of us as we progress, when we get to a place where we completely understand UAP and the occupants, kind of put aside that it's multiple different ones for the moment. When we get to that point, there's going to be another frontier with something else that we don't understand, and probably another form of life that we have to come to understand. So I don't think they're necessarily all aware of each other. They could, in the way that we see light, if something didn't see the physical world like we do, they totally miss us, for example. So while there is kind of probably, overlap and interconnectivity, I wouldn't say that they all know each other. But I'd be surprised if it wasn't as diverse as planet Earth with its wildlife. The bees. My dog runs around with a small giraffe, Teddy, and I often chuckle to myself because I think you would lose your mind if you actually saw a giraffe. You have no idea this thing is real. She would lose her mind. Like, it's only small, the one that she has. So yeah, I think it would be something like that.
Cool. Take a shot because Dan just knocked his mic if you're playing that game. Vinny, what about yourself? Thoughts on the idea of multiple phenomena and being aware that they each exist?
Well, again, it's a kind of another area of conspiracy, because we've heard from many different researchers over the years that some believe there are 4 to 10 different species, some benevolent, some malevolent. I always butcher that word, malevolent. But then we hear some researchers say that, oh, well, so far we've categorized 250 something species of extraterrestrials. And it's like, wow, okay,
Yeah.
Really hard to believe. And so where do you draw the line with things like that? There's a case in point is the Russian book of alien races that was a big story a while back, where this apparent son was clearing out his dad or his uncle's house, and they found this book, and he'd worked for the KGB, and it was about all these different races. Great story, but I don't know, it's not very believable. Some people, they hear something like that or they see it on a documentary. Well, it must be fact if it's on a documentary. So yeah, possibilities, could be true, could be complete nonsense.
Dan?
When that book is one of those things that come up when I think of how we pass stories and myths to each other. And how one person's we see all the time, there's that great ball lightning video of the ball lightning going across the train tracks. And if you look that up, it has been the person who made it. It is CGI. And the guy who made it came out straight away and said it's CGI. It was a project that he was doing. And, that's on Snopes. He's open about that. But still, you see this video get bandied about as real proof of ball lightning. And I think that's a great example of how things go. There's not necessarily any malicious intent in there, but it's kind of game of telephone.
Is it like in 5,000 years, someone's going to dig up a copy of Harry Potter and be reading it and go, wow, do you see what went on back then? Like, this is incredible. And
yeah, absolutely. And then someone else will find a copy of Endgame and wonder, why did these guys never fight? They seem pretty big deals on this planet.
Surely Thanos should have won. But yeah, good shout. Thanks for that one. That was a good question as well. Next up, moving on, slightly different topic. Vale said that one of the lesser known areas are discussed as post-event paranormal occurrences. So this is something, I suppose, getting into territories we started talking about with Com Kelleher and George Knapp and their book Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. Dan, sticking with you first for this one. Post-event paranormal occurrences. Now, as someone who, you've said before, yeah, it is a little bit. I'm going to stop saying it. Or I could shorten it to Peppo. So you've obviously mentioned before how you've seen various things or had experiences you've touched on in the past as well. Do you feel that's something that stuck with you and hung about afterwards, or is it something you subscribe to, given how many stories of that you heard through other people?
I mean, my experience has certainly lent credence to once a weird thing happened, weirder things happened faster and consistently. There's a lot of strange ones that I shared on the podcast. I'll kind of repeat a few here. For example, kind of hearing it was like a buzzing kind of sound, just kind of coming from a point in the air. and I followed to it, and my dog was aware of it as well, and we just couldn't figure out where it was coming from. It was like it was just coming from the curtain, and curtains don't make sounds like that. And it was very odd. And I'm the kind of person, you know, if I see a light flash in my room, I'm not gonna straight away take a picture and go, it's a UFO. I'm gonna try and figure out if it's reflecting off you know, an ornament in the garden or something like that first. It's always fun to do that. But after speaking with Colin, I had a few really strange occurrences, and it kind of amped up for me. So there's definitely experience that kind of backs that hitchhiker idea, but I've never had anything, you know, scary poltergeisty. Never anything where I felt in danger or anything like that. Just curious, you know, and just weird things.
Do you think, Dan, that you have to be open and even subconsciously want those experiences to happen? I've said before, I'm not a fan of the whole ghost thing. Not that I don't believe, just I don't want to see one. I have no interest in any of paranormal activity happening in and around me. So I will say I am fortunate. I've never had that happen, and I wouldn't want to. But do you think you're just maybe more open to it, which is why it does happen?
The curious thing to me is the work that Gary Nolan's doing in trying to identify a marker or some kind of difference in people who have these things happen to them. And he identified a region called the caudate putamen, where basically there would be more white brain matter connecting the regions of the brain between these two pieces. And that was found in experiences. So it seems as though an experience changes our physiology in a way that makes us more open to experiencing more of the weirdness. And that to me just sounds like a really scientific way of saying the veil was lifted and it will continue to lift, you know?
Yeah.
And people always say once you know, experience a synchronicity, you'll experience more and more, faster and faster. And it's exactly the same with the phenomena. The term that I like for it is that it's sticky. Once you have it, it stays with you.
Vinny, what are your thoughts then on those sticky portfolios and paranormal events occurring after experiences?
Yeah, I mean, Dan said quite a few things that I was thinking of, but I suppose one thing that sits with me is that possibly someone sees something, right? Maybe something a bit strange happens a few weeks or months later. They will probably go back to that first thing and think, yeah, it's connected. Whereas it might be completely random, but because they had that first experience, they're instantly, it's probably connected to that. So there's a bit of like that kind of aspect of it, possibly. But then it's a difficult area because when you go into that fringe paranormal ghost type stuff, I mean, all I've really looked at is the stuff from Skinwalker. And so Dan pretty much covered that, but it's bizarre. I don't really know.
That's like myself with this. I understand when you look at somewhere like Skinwalker, it's all the phenomena you could talk about happening at the same time. Huge dire wolves, strange beings crawling out of portals, UFOs, cattle mutilations, you know, ghostly apparitions, shadow beings. Everything seems to happen in that one place. And it makes sense that if this phenomenon is connected in any way, shape, or form, why wouldn't there be locations on the planet where it's a little bit more focused and concentrated than it would be somewhere like a Skinwalker ranch? People didn't build the ranch and that land because it was haunted or having UFO events. It just happened to be that's what happened around that area. So that's a really interesting one for me. I can see it, but again, I'm more than happy to not have any of those follow-up experiences. For me, I'm happy sticking to seeing the odd UFO here and there, which I'm always up for. So yeah, really good shout, that one. Thank you. Next up, Tara. Tara is a long-term listener to the podcast as well. So hi, Tara, if you're out on one of your bike rides listening to this. Tara wanted to know, Dan, you had mentioned that these objects or beings or entities can potentially make people feel a certain way. And Tara found that quite scary, as it could almost be a predatory tactic.
Yeah, absolutely. A way to disarm a prey or something like that. I'm just going to real quick just try and find something, because if Tara's interested in that, I was touching on something from a paper that was by Valet and I want to say Davis, but I might be wrong. I'm not able to find it. Oh well.
If you want to look at it, I can jump to Vinny on this one.
Yeah, go for it. I'll just have a quick look for it. It's definitely here somewhere.
Cool. Yeah, Vinny. So same question.
I think it comes down to intent, doesn't it? What is the intent of the phenomena? Is it to do something genuinely negative to you? Is it to just maybe even play around with you a little bit and just, just poke away at a little bit? It's really difficult to ascertain the true meaning of what they're trying to do, because some people might experience the same thing as the next person, but they might come away from that same experience feeling differently about it based on them, their personalities and their individual being. So it's another one that I think isn't just a straightforward it's this or that. I think it's more of an individual experience and an after effect.
Yeah, and I think it's something for me that would subscribe to the idea that there are multiple phenomena at play, because sometimes people describe feelings of terror, panic, fear, and that's where anyone who subscribes to the love and light side of things, I always go back to many of those types of abductions that people didn't want to happen, and they describe really harrowing events happening sometimes through generations, and that's not love and light. That's something that's unwanted. So you've got a set of beings who would potentially appear to not really care or be nonplussed as to our thoughts and feelings and well-being. And I've said it many times, but much like how we would go fishing, you don't particularly care for the fish's well-being. You pull it out, you see the fish, you take a picture with it, throw it about, and hopefully someone puts the fish back in the water. That's what happens. But then you have beings that apparently take people on board various different types of craft. They fly them across galaxies and universes. They show them all sorts of incredible things and places. But I think I'm like you, Vinny, on this one, where I appreciate someone telling me that story, but there is no evidence for that. You can't show me, and it's like the beings are from the Palladians. Okay, well, we don't know that yet. Let's point the James Webb in that direction, and let's see what's out there. That's what we can hopefully start to do with the James Webb going up.
You got it exactly. That's exactly what we're going to be using it for. I really like that. That was concise. Like, oh, you say they're from there. Cool. Let's have a look.
Yeah, let's point it at that keyhole. Is it there? Nah, can't see anything. Or actually, yep, there seems to be a planet full of light. So yep, we'll give you that one. But that's potential. Dan, any luck on that paper?
Yeah, so the paper is called Incommensurability, Orthodoxy, and the Physics of High Strangeness, a six-layer model for anomalous phenomena, and it's by Jack Vallée and Eric Davis. It was talked about in the front of the Skinwalker book, and there was a section in here that was talking about mimicry and how you could essentially survive in the world. And I'm just going to read one paragraph from it because it's kind of what I was summarizing when I spoke about it last time. And if someone's interested, I'll just say this paragraph. So they write, it is possible to have a sign that physically resembles the signified in a non-visual way. For example, the fly Spilomyia hamifera beats its wings at a frequency very close to the wing beat frequency of a dangerous wasp. I'm not even going to try and say the species name. As a result, when one of these flies is in the vicinity of a group of these wasps, the fly gains some immunity from attack by birds. The fly's mimicry of the wasps occurs only in the auditory modality, and it's not attacked by would-be predators because it sounds like the wasps. So essentially, it's hiding in plain sight and using another species' ability to do that. That's kind of a cool ability. And I wonder, is there a way that species can do that to us with light or something like that? Just appear to us as something that we expect and hide in plain sight.
Yeah, good shout. That's why some of these UFOs appear in the sky, flashing bright lights everywhere, because, well, look down there, it's flashing bright lights everywhere in these buildings, so let's do that up here. Maybe not understanding that, we don't do that up there like that, so.
Yeah, and there's a very famous example of us using light and sound to communicate with UFOs, and I say we. Spielberg, he that great last sequence of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where the scientists, and I'm going to just switch it a little bit here because there are scientists, there are artists, there are musicians, military guys, and they're all being creative in their own ways. And I think we could say that they're all intuitive people, and they're all drawn to this essentially dance with an alien craft where they kind of figure each other out and repeat tones to each other. And eventually then, it finds its feet and the communication happens. And yeah, light and sound. And we're talking about resonance again, and it sounds super hippie, but it's not. The whole universe is resonance.
I remember another movie that used very similar tactics called Independence Day, and we used light and sound to try and communicate, and it got shot out of the sky. So yeah, just
To be
remember,
fair,
folks.
they use light and sound to blow up the White House as well. So
Yeah,
situational thing.
This is true. So that again, it was just mimicry. Oh yeah, look, boom.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, some really, really good stuff on that one, folks. Listen, we'll move on to some of the comments from Twitter now. UFO Canada, I really like this one. This goes into the pure speculation territory, Vinny, you'll like it. UFO Canada said, I want people to start focusing on what exopolitics would look like. On Earth, examples of advanced humans meeting lesser advanced versions of the same species were disastrous. How does all of humanity avoid the fate of the Aztecs, Vinny?
We can't, I don't think. If we're being visited by an advanced civilization, whether it be extraterrestrial or interdimensional, they're clearly more advanced than us already. So how do we go about having a choice? If they want to come down here and take over, then I'm sure that they could, But this goes into something that I think about all the time, is I hear people say, well, they're definitely like friendly, these things, because they would have wiped us out by now. And that's obviously a very human way of looking at things, because what if their plan finished in 2022? What if it finished in 5022? How do we know? We don't. So the fact that people say things like that is a very human way of thinking. And that, yeah, it can cause arguments when you try and bring that up with people, because I don't want to, rain on their parade when they think that all these beings are really friendly and that, because it's a nice thing to think. But at the same time, maybe a little naive, and I don't want to draw any negative attention from people, so I'm maybe playing devil's advocate a little bit. But
No, that's totally fair, and maybe the word isn't friendly; it's they're tolerant of us. And again, that example of if another species are watching us, Dan, you used the example about the gorilla in the cage that finds the key, and we're not wiping out the gorilla, but if that gorilla in the cage finds the key and starts to play about with the lock, then maybe you think about tasing it and putting it back in its place. But if that gorilla starts building nuclear weapons, then we go ahead and wipe all the gorillas out because we don't want them getting that. We do it with our own species, where we don't allow other countries. I say we, I mean the superpowers predominantly. The ones I'm talking about. They don't allow other countries to have the same weapons they do.
Iceland, right? That
Absolutely,
huge
Iceland,
superpower.
yeah. That huge nuclear superpower of Iceland. But yeah, so you have other countries who don't allow other countries to have the same weaponry. And if they did have, they go to war, they fight back. And like I say, I'm sure if dolphins, which Jazz Shaw, I'm sure will appreciate, developed nuclear weapons, or even started to look like they were developing any kind of weaponry, we would wipe them out as a species, as the more dominant species. So you have to entertain the idea that another species being tolerant is watching us playing with the matches. We've got nuclear capabilities. Maybe we're still on the cusp of, will they use it properly? Will they not? You look at something as wonderful as the internet and some of the weird things that it's used for. But, here we are recording a podcast, and it's great. We can do this from different locations, and people are going to hear this all around the world. Nuclear weapons and nuclear energy, has so many incredible uses and purposes, but we stick it in the end of a warhead and drop it on Hiroshima, drop it on Nagasaki. And I've just watched for the first time ever The Abyss, which Dan had been telling me for a long time I should be checking out. I did not see it going the way it went, but the idea that they had been dropping weapons and testing them out at sea. And sorry for the spoiler, but the movie was made in 1989. These beings live under the ocean, so for them, we are testing these warheads and weapons in their environment. So there comes a point where another species says, "Enough's enough." Yeah, Dan.
Yeah, 100%. And we're going to be moving forward into space as well. And what do you think we're going to put on the ships to protect ourselves as we go out into space? It's going to be nuclear weapons. So not only are we going to have them on Earth, we're going to start strewing them about the I was going to say universe, but we're not quite there yet. The solar system, I'll say for now. And the drives that we might build might be nuclear based as well. So if there's something inherently wrong with the technology that for some reason we don't see, then everything's going to be based on it. So we need to know now and find a separate path to start trudging down, because we're at the point where there's just a lot of people on Earth and we need a lot of energy. We've already seen in Texas, like the energy going down, and that was for multiple reasons. But if that's happening in America, what do you think are happening in the places that we don't hear about daily, that we don't hear, that don't have news representation in the world? It gets a little scary to think about.
Dan, just to take it back on the same question UFO Canada was asking as well about meeting other potential species that are more advanced, is there a huge element of luck as how we approach any potential communication, first contact, or conversation like that?
It really depends on your outlook in life, I think. Glass half full, glass half empty type thing. We can subscribe to the Independence Day aliens, or we can think they're more probably like ET, or we can put a lot of identities onto them. One that's been spoken about recently is the third body problem and the species we encounter in that. And they're not necessarily immediately nefarious, even though from our perspective they are. It's more that the situation in the universe and how life interact. I'm trying not to spoil anything here, but how life interacts with each other when it finds other forms of life. The author argues that it's in a species' best interest to take anyone else out first, or to they have some inventive ideas on how to try and protect yourself peacefully, that I won't spoil. But yeah, the theory is called dark forest theory, so have a look at that, or have a look on my Twitter. There was a video I posted that was a bit of a summary, and yeah, it presents some interesting quandaries.
Awesome. Vinny, we're going to move on to the next one, and this one is from Noel. Noel on Twitter said, it's a pure guess, of course, but I'm sure they must have some idea of the technology as they have seen and been able to study it to a degree. So I think, and this gets confusing because they use they and they to mean the government and also they. So Noel thinks, I'm going to translate this, that the government have no idea who the beings are or where the beings come from, and if the beings are not hostile, what are they doing? So what do you think to that? Do you think, why the government and the military treat it so much as a potential threat?
Yeah, I think the threat aspect comes in because it's a genuine unknown. So it's kind of fear the worst, hope for the best kind of, thing. It's you can't just think, well, yeah, they're probably not going to hurt us. It is just you don't know. So just prepare for the worst, like I say, and hope that it doesn't get to that point. But again, having a craft or being aware of the technology is only the beginning of trying to understand anything else about them. You can't speak to them, you can't find out any reasons why they're here or anything. You just have the physical object. Yes, you might be able to study it scientifically, even potentially attempt to back engineer it, but that still doesn't give you the answers as to the bigger picture, and what could possibly happen further down the line.
And the idea as well, Dan, you mentioned E.T., the movie before. In that movie, Elliot gets sick because of his close contact with E.T., and that's a threat. So E.T., the cute little alien, was a threat to human beings. That's why the military went in the way they did, because they don't fully understand it. You take all precautions, and you know what? Worst case scenario, you have to get rid of E.T. before he gets rid of all life on Earth. Which I suppose they should make ET actually from the military point of view. That would be a good remake, wouldn't it? Just to see it from the other point of view when it's a bad alien. But
I think it was originally meant to be. There was an idea that after Close Encounters, you would basically have a film where a farmer was under siege. I can't remember the title of what he was going to call it, but yeah, it changed and they focused on the friendly alien, and that's what we all took from it. But it'd be very different if it was Signs, but with ET mixed in, right? It would. But then, from what we're talking about here, that would probably be a bit more realistic, because different members of the same species, as we well know, being humans, can have very different outlooks and reactions to the world and to other species. There are some of us that, we're fine seeing people get hurt in movies, but the second the animal gets hurt, we're a puddle. We're just in a puddle of tears. I'd be really interested to see how our definition of life changes when we have to incorporate their definition of life as well. Because we can't go to war arguing over how we classify life, but it's certainly going to open our eyes and make us go, that's super interesting. We didn't think of, we've argued for years if a virus is life, but you're saying if we get a powerful enough microscope, it shows intelligence. It would change everything for us. There'd be people out there that didn't want to bleach their houses anymore because they were killing things.
Dan, you mentioned Signs, which I really like the movie Signs, for all it's got its flaws. One of my favourite moments in movie history, as pertains to aliens or any type of phenomenon, is where they show the news footage from the first sighting in Brazil, and the alien walks past the camera. And all I can imagine now is imagine that, but with E.T., who just kind of walks past in waves, and you feel it's not quite got the same gravitas, does it, as the kind of scary entity that does scroll by the camera.
No, not at all. No one at that birthday party would have screamed if that happened. They would have just been like, this is just this cute little thing waving at the end.
Shoots a laser gun at them. Next up was from Basir, and Basir says it's the consciousness aspect of it. We still don't fully understand how consciousness originates, so we can't know how the phenomenon relates to it. This is probably one of the buzzwords of the decade as relates to the phenomenon, and I am sure there are people out there screaming that it's overused or used incorrectly, as I probably do it. Dan, here's a big question for you. What does consciousness mean to you?
That's a really good question. I think of it as the way that I think of me as me. That thing I'm referring to when I say me, that is the conscious part of me. It gets to interact with the world. It gets to take ideas and change them and put them back out into the world. There's an awareness and a kind of consciousness allows us to do things to the world outside of us. In a way that other species can't. And I don't think it's that other species don't have consciousness. I think that it's a sliding scale, similar to intelligence. There are more intelligent people, less intelligent people. I think we're going to end up finding it's the same kind of thing, though that is complete speculation. One of my interests is the work they're doing with psilocybin and therapy at the moment, because they're having to essentially talk about the effects that the psilocybin is having on the participants. So where, for the past 50 years, all we've had is long-haired hippies in fields taking mushrooms saying, oh, dude, it looks like the world's smudging, or, whatever they describe it as. Now we actually have to come up with scientific language to describe these effects. So, in 5 years, we might see in a supermarket a packet of psilocybin that says, this will make a half hour feel like 1 hour to you. And just help us. Once we have that language, the conversations we can have with it become really something else. Like the listener said, we don't really understand what it is, but we're grappling now for the language to be able to have that conversation.
Dan, I'm just going to ask you to follow up on that. Do you think the movie Pixar, by Pixar Soul, is a soft disclosure for the younger generation?
And
you know what? I asked it jokingly, but the idea being that, you stick that out there, big budget, Hollywood studios always linked to disclosure, and you start getting really young kids to think about the concept of an afterlife and what a soul is, and it's the essence of someone. It gets them ready for, 5, 10, 15 years down the line, when these are the generations starting to have that conversation that we're kind of at the beginning of now. It helps them understand it a hell of a lot better, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it gives them the knowledge as well. One of the things I loved about that film was that everyone wasn't defined by one thing. Everyone had like 6 or 7 things that they loved. And the main character in the film, again, sorry, spoilers, but his whole thing, was it her? I can't remember.
Him?
I'm going to go with him for the sake of argument. That character, their whole thing was that they loved the experience of living. Which is interesting because it's a very Buddhist kind of philosophy to be putting into that film. But you're right. Now there are children out there that kind of go, oh yeah, I like the way the light plays on leaves, and they'll sit in the field, and as kids do. And they're kind of directly inspired by that film. There was another one, Inside Out, that
I like
dealt with just the emotions inside somebody's head. And I read a story that the director, when they had a screening of the film, the day after that, one of the Pixar guys came to him and said, oh, my kid swam for the first time this morning because of Inside Out. And he was like, what do you mean? Like, there's no swimming in Inside Out. And he said, well, he just said to me, he was on the side of the pool, and he said to me, "Dad, Fear has got the console at the moment, but I'm going to bring Joy in." And then he just jumped into the pool. And I was like, that's so cool. It gave that kid a scaffold and a language to be able to deal with, you know, a mental, well, mindfulness, essentially. And many of us are only just discovering that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's very cool that the next generation have got some really cool shorthand ways of discussing some lofty concepts.
Vinny, what about same to yourself? How do you think of consciousness?
I mean, I come from such a nuts and bolts background. I try and think about it, and I certainly listen to a lot of discussions about it. There's some great people, some great friends that I've had discussions with about it, but I still can't seem to find a way in for myself to latch onto something and go, that's where I'm going to start. That's the direction I'm going to go, because I just feel lost with it. I do spend time on my own, and I sit there and I think, right, try and think about it, Vinny. Come on, really get in touch with yourself and that. But I can't. I just can't kind of grasp it, or I get a child screaming from the next room and it just breaks for concentration. So, I have a lot of questions about consciousness myself. And if I start to try and answer one now, I think I'd be doing the whole subject a disservice by trying to sound like I know anything about it when I don't,
Well, listen, I bet a lot of people are the same, though, where they think, I would love to explore the idea of consciousness.
Yeah.
And how do I go about doing that? So obviously my recommendation for the layman would be Pixar's Soul or Inside Out. But Dan, you would probably be able to recommend either a book or a site or someone's Twitter feed that would give some good suggestions of an idiot's guide to consciousness.
So there's a documentary called Fantastic Fungi, and it talks about how trees and fungi talks to each other. That would be the place that I'd recommend someone start, because it just gives you an idea about how things think that's very different from us. And Vinny's totally right. Like, no one can answer this question. I sound so confident kind of answering this, but it's just because it's a hobby. I don't know is the answer. But I'd sure like dig into to figure this out.
I said recently, Vinny, that do you know what makes me really confident in, if you want to call it consciousness or a soul or, a oneness or whatever, that there's a force, like a Star Wars-esque force, is, and I told Dan this, how my dog knows about a minute before my wife's car gets anywhere near our estate, he will jump up on the window and sit looking, and then sure enough, within 30 seconds, the car will come round, go on the drive, and that car would have been far away.
Wow.
But the dog knows. He just happens to know. And for me, that just shows you that the dog shouldn't know that that's my wife coming out that car. And a street filled with cars, when the car wasn't even near, that the dog just gets aware that you're close by. So there's that kind of connectivity for me, and that makes me go, because I'm quite nuts and bolts as well. But that's where I can point to something and go, yeah, do you know what? But I can see why. I can see that.
Yeah, that
I'm
makes
just gonna
sense.
give a second recommendation here, just because what you're talking about has a name by someone called Rupert Sheldrake, and he refers to it as morphic resonance. And it's kind of like, if you know the Akashic records, that there's a place where information is held and that we can collectively access that. Same kind of deal. But he's actually done scientific experiments with it where they would vary the time that the dog came home. Oh, sorry, the time that the wife came home from work, and the dog would still react, even though that those times were changing. So they tried to introduce, blind, double blind kind of standards to these tests. They did it with telephone ringing and things like that as well, and generally found that there was a higher than 50 or coin flip chance that these things were happening. So there seems to be something there. His son also used morphic resonance in his exams at Oxford. He basically would wait 20 minutes after everyone else had started the exams, with the idea that the question would be easier for him to answer once everyone else had answered it before him. He passed. No proof whether it worked, but he passed.
What a way to test that out. And listen, one more question. We have a whole load more we could go through. We'll keep those for another time, Vinny, for getting you on as well. But this one was from Osiris PTA 1. Question, so we'll start with Vinny. Why do you think there has been a sudden about face after nearly a century of debunking, obfuscating, and stigmatizing the UFO UAP phenomenon? Why do you think all of a sudden now we've got the forum that just happened, the Ignatius forum yesterday? Why do we have people like Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon talking about it? Why do we have the government and the UN potentially establishing permanent offices to study UFOs? What's the big change for you?
I mean, it's probably an obvious answer. I think a lot of people have said many times in the last few years is December 2017 with the New York Times. I mean, I come across people all the time who have said, oh, yeah, I've always been interested in UFOs, but they never felt comfortable talking about it. Now they will. And they all put it down to, well, everyone else is talking about it since what happened with the Navy videos. And they obviously mean the breaking story from the end of 2017. And yeah, that's all it comes down to. And I know it's probably not the most exciting answer, and we hear it a lot, but that's what I've come across so many times. And I'm talking about family members like uncles and that, who you're just the last people you think would ever talk about it are all talking about it because of that same thing. So yeah.
So it's the snowball rolling down the hill.
Yeah,
rather than
absolutely.
that big bang. Yeah.
Well, it's like I said, it's the curiosity that a lot of people have probably always had. But the moment that, they're just scared of talking about it because, how do you approach someone and go, do you want to talk about UFOs, basically? Because, they're more worried about being laughed at than being accepted, kind of thing. And now it's like there's more opportunity. So
cool. Awesome. And Dan, finishing off for yourself then, why do you think the sudden about face?
I think it's important to emphasize that what Vinnie said is probably the most correct answer to this question. Lou and Chris did what they did with a plan. It's going spiffingly, it seems. And yeah, it's all thanks to them and their decision to get something out of the door. They might not have done an Edward Snowden and run to Russia and then given the videos to the media, but in a way, some people seem to be arguing that they'd believe it more if they'd have done that, which is weird to me, because they're conversational, they're in the media. That I know we're frustrated that we can't hear past those NDAs, but it is what it is, and we are getting there. Private industry and space kind of come into it for a lot of people, but I don't think they would be having this conversation if 2017 hadn't happened. We would be looking at that through a completely different lens, whereas instead we're going, oh yeah, we're going to the moon, we're going to Mars, and also they're a UAP. That bit wouldn't be there if Lou and Chris didn't do what they did.
Yeah, awesome. Dan, do you want to just quickly mention the raffle that you've got going on for anyone on KGRA listening or anyone in the coming weeks that are going to hear about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the moment we're running a raffle. It's for a signed poster that you can actually kind of see one of them behind Andy. It's not the signed one behind Andy, but it's a Lou Elizondo truth poster. Looks very much like the Obama one.
I can't work out. There we go.
You got it.
That. Yeah.
You flexing your guns there as well.
Yeah, they're sagging. Yeah.
And we're gonna be splitting the donations 50-50. So you can buy into a raffle. The prize of that raffle is the poster, the signed poster, and a matching NFT that I made. The highest donation given, that person gets a personal call from Lou Elizondo to say thank you, which is outstanding. Currently, that bid sits at about £600, and we are up to £2,100, which is about, I want to say $3,500, something like that.
Dan, can you please clear up quickly that all you've said so far is we are splitting the donations 50-50?
Oh, sorry.
And that's not what's happening.
Yes, so we are splitting the donations 50-50 between two charities, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and the Humane Society International. They will each get 50% of what is donated. The take-in so far is incredible, and I'm going to be really proud of the community when I get to give these take-ins over. But it'll be open until Christmas Eve at 11 p.m. UK time. The drawing will happen at 3:33 a.m. We'll be adding prizes in the weeks going forward as well. So keep an eye on it. The spoils are going to get better, basically. And you can find that at go.rallyup.com/truth. Or have a look on my Twitter. It's pinned to my profile.
Awesome.
And that Vinnie, is the signal, which is here. Damn, I did the same thing as well.
Yeah, it's really hard to gauge where you are. If you're listening to this, you're missing out on watching us try and point at things on the screen. It's like inverted controls. And Vinnie, what have you got coming up on your channel? How can people find you, and how can they go and check out your stuff?
Well, this week I've got a DJ from Calling All Beings. Then I got a bit of a break this weekend. Next week, I'm speaking to Erling Strand. We're going to be talking about the hairstyle and lights.
Very cool.
If people want to come and follow me, they can do so on YouTube. It's just Disclosure Team. On Instagram, you can find me disclosure_team. Twitter is Disclosure Team _ just to confuse everybody with the placing of the underscore there. But if you go to Instagram, which is where I post most, I've got a link tree there. So that's probably just the easiest thing.
Awesome. And if you're listening to this now, then this week our listener call-in was out, which is getting more and more popular. Really good calls on that one as well. It's like your classic radio call-in show format. So you can check that one out, available on YouTube, and it's on all the streaming audio platforms as well. If you want into the Discord, then sign up to the Patreon, or you can sign up to the Apple Premium, and either one will get you access to the Discord channel, which is really fun, and it's where we've got a lot of the suggestions for this show from as well. But other than that, please check out the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to Vinnie's YouTube channel, check out the raffle that Dan's currently running, and we are not splitting those profits 50-50. They are going to 2 charities, and you at least get to give some money to really good causes and be in with the chance of winning some really cool prizes too. So that is all for this week. Thank you very much to everyone on KGRA for hosting us. Hi to everyone in the chat who's stuck around for this one, and hi to everyone listening or watching in the future as well. Hope it's been a good one, and we'll speak to you soon. That is all for this week's show. Thank you very much for listening. Please remember to leave the podcast a review on your chosen platform. You can like, retweet and subscribe. That would all be very much appreciated. The shows are being uploaded onto YouTube as we speak more and more. You can sign up at patreon.com/thatUFO podcast to access the shows ad-free as well. Please get in touch on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, That UFO Podcast. Of course, on Twitter, it's at UFOUAPAM. And again, folks, as always, keep looking up. You never know what you might see.
It wasn't a tic-tac and not quite a saucer, more like a hubcap designed by Chaucer, a little baroque and quite steampunk, like Alice was playing bass for the Parliament of Folk. The little fucker hovered right outside of my window, and when I shoved out the screen, he made it an issue. I don't think he expected me to see his ass, but I'd had some champagne and smoked a little around. Meditative game of state full on meta. Can't imagine how it could have been any better. I got to the top of the stairs and there he was. Like, you awake? I was about to abduct you, cuz. I jumped back and nearly kissed myself, and I climbed out the window after the elf, and I woke up in my bed and there was something on my head and everything was weird and everything was red. And I called out to my boys, they thought this was noise, they thought it was a dream, they thought it was my toys, they thought it was my problems, and they think I should seek therapy, and I don't know what it is because it doesn't really scare me. If you really want to know who I think I be, I think it's you and me and us and we and him and her and that and she and that thing over there and what's that, Jake? But if we're being serious, open your mind, consider your heart, consider time, consider your space, consider your lies, consider your life, consider your eyes. It wasn't a tic-tac and not quite a saucer.
What's that in the clouds between that sun and moon? Got sleep around the 6 and got winds in my room.
It wasn't a tic-tac and not quite a saucer.
What's that in the clouds between that sun and moon?